Hello, this is Yogeshwar 7000 again, and I'm back with another very interesting topic today, which is the connection of the Puranas and planets and astrology per se. And as I've already mentioned through my other previous videos, some of my other previous videos, that sometimes stories from the Puranas can give us a lot of insight into Vedic astrology because these Puranas, as people call them, mythological texts, they're actually not myths, they are the truth. And like, for example, I had created a video some time ago between the relationship of the planet Mercury and Moon, and why is there a problem when Moon and Mercury are conjunct, is because I've explained it through a story from the Puranas as to the birth of Mercury and what happened, how was Mercury born, and that video also explains the characteristic of the planet Moon, how it has the capability to attract any woman in his life. He has 27 wives per se anyways, which are represented through the 27 nakshatras, which are considered to be the 27 daughters of Daksha. So these stories from the Puranas help us give a little more insight into the details of astrology. So this was one example. The behavior of Jupiter in that story shows what a large heart Jupiter has. He was willing to accept his wife back from the planet Moon, and eventually he forgives the planet Moon because of his sattva characteristic or sattvic nature. So these Puranas per se give us a lot of insights through the stories about Vedic astrology, and based on these insights we can do a little more accurate analysis of a birth chart. Of course, there are texts which are given by the Bhrigu Sutras and the Brihat Parasharhora Shastra and the Jaimini Sutras, which are the prime source. But sometimes these ancient scripts, like I said, these Puranas also help us. And I just give you an example of one of my earlier videos. So today we are going to be discussing about planets directly, which are explained in a very important Purana, which is out of the 18 Mahapuranas. Puranas, for people from the West, they are ancient texts, and there are 18 Mahapuranas, like the Shiva Mahapurana, the Vishnu Mahapurana, etc. So out of the 18 Mahapuranas, the Devi Bhagavad Purana is a very important ancient text, and it has given some kind of a description about planets, and we can use this description to know a little more about the characteristics of the planets, which we already know. But what is the perspective of the Puranas on planets? So today we are going to be discussing what the Devi Bhagavad Purana has described about the planets, and this is what has been described by the great sage Maharishi Veda Vyasa in the 16th chapter in the 8th book on planets in the Devi Bhagavad Purana. So what Maharishi Veda Vyasa describes about planets is that first he says that, look, the sun and moon are major benefics, and we can see them through our eyes sitting here from Earth. And these devas, as he calls them, he says that they're also subject to a lot of malefic influence, and he describes the influence of Rahu and Ketu, how they influence the planets sun and moon during an eclipse. And he says that even the great planets like sun and moon are subjected to malefic influences. So that's one description he has explained us. Of course, we already know about it, but this is the perspective of Maharishi Vedavyasa, which is described in the great Devi Bhagavad Purana. So I thought I'd just bring this to your attention. Also, he describes that about the 28th nakshatra in the Devi Bhagavad Purana. As we know that there are 27 nakshatras, but Maharishi Vedavyasa describes about the 28th nakshatra. And if you go back to my video on nakshatras, you will find a mention that I've mentioned that although there are 27 Puranas as per the Vedic astrology, but there is a mention of the 28th nakshatra also, which is described here in the Devi Bhagavad Purana. And the name of that nakshatra is Abhijit, which is spelled as Abhijit. And God has created this 28th nakshatra along with the other nakshatras in the zodiac to revolve around in the zodiac. So that's one description of Vedic astrology here in this Purana. Also, in this Purana, Vedavyasa describes the planet Venus as an extremely, extremely powerful planet described by Vedavyasa in Devi Bhagavad Purana. We know that it is powerful, but he has given specific mention by describing Venus as extremely, extremely powerful. So of course, we have to see what planets are powerful as described by the Brihat Parashar Shastra, and we also have to take the Shadbal into consideration as we have discussed in our earlier videos. So we have to go specific to a birth chart as far as the strength of a planet is concerned in a person's birth chart. But in general, Maharishi Vedavyasa has described the planet Venus as extremely, extremely powerful. And also he has described the planet Venus generally favorable to all the persons and being very, very auspicious. So here, as we already know that Venus is a great benefic, the great sage Vedavyasa also has described Venus as an extremely benefic planet here in the Srimad Devi Bhagavad Purana in the 16th chapter in the 8th book on planets. So we have to remember that as far as the strength of a planet is concerned. And also the ability of Venus to provide a lot of auspicious things. Now, he has also described that Venus is a planet which actually helps in removing obstructions as far as rains are concerned. So whenever there is a problem related to not getting enough rains, and this was described in a day and age when other methods of irrigation were not available that easy, and agriculture was totally dependent on rains. So the great sage Vedavyasa has described the planet Venus being auspicious, and also he has described that the planet Venus, who is the son of Bhrigu Rishi, removes obstacles to the rains. So we have to remember that. And when we are doing an analysis, say for example, we do an analysis of a country or a region from Vedic astrology's perspective, we have to take into consideration the position and the transit of rains, the position and transit of Venus as far as rains are concerned. So that's one way of looking at it. And here he has also described the planet Mercury in this Devi Bhagavad Purana, and it has been described that the planet Mercury also moves along with the sun, just like the planet Venus, sometimes ahead and sometimes behind, as we see how the transits go when we look and analyze a birth chart. And here he has described Mercury as the son of moon, and we've already discussed that in another Purana about the birth of Mercury and how we see that Mercury is described as the son of moon. So this particular Purana also confirms that. So Maharishi Vedvyasa says that Mercury, who is the son of moon, when it gets away from the sun, like he has described, Venus and moon both, sometimes they move ahead of sun and sometimes they move behind, or sometimes they're along with sun. As far as the motion of planets are concerned, if we look at a birth chart or a Vedic chart, not necessarily a birth chart, a Vedic chart, and even in transits. So he has said, Vedvyasa has said that when Mercury moves away from sun, then strong winds and hurricanes happen. So when you're looking or analyzing a chart where a situation arises when there are hurricanes, you might want to check the distance of Mercury with sun, and that's been described by Vedvyasa, Maharishi Vedvyasa in Devi Bhagavad Purana, that when Mercury moves away from sun, and like he has already explained, I'm repeating, that sometimes Mercury is ahead of sun, sometimes it's behind the sun, sometimes it's along with the sun. But whenever Mercury is far away from sun, then hurricanes happen. Also, whenever Mercury is far away from sun, then you can see meteors falling. And you can always see instances of droughts. So it is not considered to be good whenever Mercury moves too far away from sun. So you will find it, you may be able to find it when these situations happen, hurricanes, droughts, etc. What was the position of Mercury and what was the distance of Mercury between sun and Mercury? Was it a large distance or not? Normally Mercury is very close to the sun, but this adverse effect is felt whenever Mercury moves away from the sun. Now, Vedvyasa also has described the planet Mars in Devi Bhagavad Purana, that it moves in one Rashi for 45 days whenever it is not retrograde. So when it's direct, it moves in a Rashi or a zodiac sign in 45 days. And he has described Mars, which is a problem creator. And we already know that it's a malefic, but he has said that Mars always causes all kinds of problems and evils and miseries. That's a general statement, and we know that it's natural. Malefic as well, as per the other scriptures which we've been reading of Brigu and Parashar and Gemini, etc. But here you have to realize that, say for example, if you are reading a chart and Mars is situated as a benefic planet for that, like for example Cancer ascendant Mars is a benefic. So do not consider Mars to be a benefit. It is a yoga karaka as well, an extreme benefic, but it will still have some malefic influence, because generally it is a natural malefic and its aspects have to be taken into consideration. Its placement has to be taken into consideration. Sometimes it's weak, too weak, again malefic influence will happen. So do not generalize by looking at a chart and saying, oh okay, Mars is a benefic for this ascendant or this zodiac sign or this ascendant rather. That's what we generally look at an ascendant and see what the planet is good for or not. Just remember that Mars is a natural malefic, so it is going to have some kind of a malefic influence in everybody's birth chart, regardless of whether that planet is a benefic in that person's birth chart or not. And that has been very easily or very clearly explained and confirmed here by Maharishi Vedvyasa in Devi Bhagavad Purana. And then he talks about the planet Jupiter. And Vedvyasa explains Jupiter as a planet which moves in one zodiac sign for approximately a year. and he is considered to be a benefic, general benefic. Now he has described Venus as a major benefic. However, Jupiter he is calling just a benefic. Venus he is described as extremely powerful. He has not described Jupiter as extremely powerful as far as when it's compared with the planet Venus. So we have to remember that. And he says that generally it is benefic, however, with the condition that it should not be retrograde. So remember, look at a chart and the position of Jupiter in a chart, and there could be a red flag there when you see Jupiter as retrograde. And analyzing a retrograde planet becomes extremely difficult when it comes to all the 7 planets. Actually 5 planets, because Sun and Moon are never retrograde, and Rahu and Ketu are always retrograde. So there are 5 planets which can move direct or retrograde. So the analysis of a retrograde planet has been challenged for a lot of astrologers. But here we get a little hint given by Maharishi Vedvyasa in Bhagavad Devi Purana about the retrogression of the planet Jupiter. And he says that the planet Jupiter, when it's retrograde, may not be benefic. So remember that. So that's one very good insight we're getting from this Purana. Then he moves to the planet Saturn, and he says that Saturn takes about 30 months to pass over one zodiac sign. We already know that it takes 2.5 years. And he confirms that here in this Purana. And again, he says, just like the planet Mars, that it gives evils and miseries to mankind generally, regardless of the fact that Mars may be benefic or not a benefic for a chart. It will give evils and miseries always in some form or the other. Here again, just like Mars, he says that Saturn, regardless of the fact that it may be a benefic in a particular birth chart, or sometimes it may start to give benefic results as far as its transit is concerned. Generally, he says that Saturn causes all kinds of misery, and it is a major malefic. He has described Saturn. So we know that, like for example, for a Taurus ascendant, for example, or for a Libra ascendant, Saturn is considered to be a benefic. But no, when we do our chart readings, remember that it's been described, of course, by the other scriptures as well. And here it's been confirmed by Maharishi Vedvyasa in the Devi Bhagavad Purana that generally Saturn will cause problems because it's a major malefic and causes all sorts of unrest. And if you look at my video on the Saturn Saraswati, I've described that, you know, a lot of astrologers say that, well, if the Saturn Saraswati happens for a person who has Saturn as a benefic in his chart, it won't affect him as much. No, don't buy that theory, because Saturn is a malefic regardless of the fact that it may be exalted or it may be a benefic. You know, even while exalted, it may give a malefic aspect, because we know that Saturn's aspects are extremely malefic. So do not disregard the fact that he's been described. So 2 planets have been described in this Purana as extremely malefic, which is Mars and Saturn, Saturn being the most malefic between the two. 2 planets have been described as benefic in this Purana, which are Jupiter and Venus, where Venus is the most benefic out of the 2, which has been described as benefics, Jupiter and Venus. And then he's given a little indication that, you know, do not consider Jupiter as a major benefic when it's retrograde, in retrograde motion, because it may not be very benefic. So he's talking about these planets as far as transits are concerned in general, but we can apply these principles when we do our chart readings, because these are very powerful insights we are getting from this great Purana. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and in the meanwhile, I'll recommend subscribe to my channel and check out my website. There is a link below, and I will see you with an interesting topic soon. Goodbye.